Hello, and welcome to The Green Room by Deloitte, an award-winning podcast where we explore the topics that matter most in business. I'm George Parrott, and this is episode number 51, where we ask, what does it take to make an idea a success?
I think that your personal conviction is hugely important, because if you don't believe in it, nobody else is going to believe in it. You can't push something that you don't have faith in.
And every time you pass an idea, it's amazing. Ideas have this ability that they multiply.
You have your best ideas when you're relaxed, which is why people often have them when they're in their shower or driving or doing something that isn't work.
It's the beauty of it. It's not like it's a science and an art combined. There's not a formula for it.
Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. Just as a reminder, you can find all of our previous episodes on our website or on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from. And today we're talking about ideas and how to make them a success. And I'm joined by the lovely Tiffany, who for so many years was the ideas machine behind The Green Room. How are you, Tiffany?
What an introduction. Thank you so much, George. It's lovely to be here for another episode while Lizzie is still away. So I'm jumping in for her once again. And it's one of these things, I guess, once you let a producer loose from behind the scenes, you can't get rid of them anymore. But delighted to be here. What are we talking about this episode?
Yeah, as I said, we're talking about ideas and how to make them a success. And I think we can all relate to having good and maybe sometimes not so good ideas. And they might pop into our heads while we're in the shower or walking the dog or in the middle of the night sometimes. But I think it's easier said than done to make them an actual success, isn't it? So, and Tiffany, you and I can chat for hours about this, but I think we need some experts to really talk us through their experience on this one. So who's in the studio this week?
Absolutely. We're really lucky to be joined by two incredibly creative people for this episode. So first of all, Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of NotPla, which is a startup with the goal of making packaging disappear. Welcome, Rodrigo.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hi, George. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And also delighted to be joined by Sadia, Ahmed, who is the sustainability and climate lead for Deloitte Ventures, which is all about making change happen for our business and for our clients as well. So welcome, Sadia.
Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely delighted to be here today.
That's brilliant. Just to break the ice, perhaps, on this like big topic of ideas, innovation, and making them a success. As you mentioned, George, they could come to you at any point, probably the most awkward kind of moment or place where you're not expecting them, rather than when you're sitting down at your desk. But when do you have your best ideas, or where, perhaps?
I suppose I have my best ideas when I'm out walking. I love to be out in nature. I find, just being out and about really inspiring, and it relaxes me. And I think you have your best ideas when you're relaxed, which is why people often have them when they're in their shower or driving or doing something that isn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Rodrigo?
For me, depends what type of ideas, but like normally we work in a quite systematic way. We have ideation sessions where we produce as much quantity of ideas as possible, and then it's a distillation work to try to come up with the best ones. So normally is the best way for us to generate ideas.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, completely different approaches there. Where one when your mind is completely switched off, and then actually dedicating time to come up with ideas, it's a different approach. But I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit more. But let's get stuck into the topic of the day then. And Rodrigo, perhaps if you could tell us the story of NotPla a little bit and how that idea came up.
Maybe even before, I can share a bit my personal story. So when I grew up, I always loved ideas, and I really wanted to be an inventor. But you cannot, at least in Spain at that time, there's not the studies to be an inventor. I studied architecture instead, where you work with ideas in different scale. You work with ideas related to the building environment, but I have been always really tempted to work on a smaller scale as well. So I went to study in different universities. I was quite lucky. I was able to push my studies until the late 20s, even 30s. So I did different programs, and I ended up in London studying a quite relatable with invention program called Innovation Design Engineering. This is where I met my co-founder, Pierre. It's a master program in Imperial College and the Royal College of Art. And there is where we started to experiment with different materials to be able to replace plastic to package water. So normally water is packaged on plastic, as most of the people know, and we wanted to find a way that we could replace that plastic for some natural materials. And we ended up with seaweed as this natural material that can grow really fast. and we were able to make a membrane that can contain water. And not only you can contain water for a while, but you can eat that membrane afterwards. So we started to make prototypes out of that, and then we put a video online on how to do it. That goes quite a lot of millions of views. And then after that, we were able to get a bit of support from the European Union to keep the ball moving and to get more support from other people and chemists and engineers, and to start to make the idea big. A few years down the line, we have been able to do quite a lot of different things on this space. With the original product that is called O, is the sound that people give it when they see it for the first time. They make that sound. They say like O. We have done things like the London Marathon, where we replace with glucosate content all the bottles needed in one of the stations for the 47,000 runners. We have done Roland Garros with Little Orange, with Tropicana. We have done replacement of ketchup sachets. And then we expanded into other products that at the moment they contain plastic as well. So we are working now on replacing the coating inside of the takeaway boxes. I just came back from Istanbul from the final of the UEFA Champions League, where we replace all the plastic boxes in the stadium for our Just Eat NotPla line boxes. And we're doing another thing like flexible film, seaweed paper, rigid material. So we're quite excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing story. And I think we'll pick up on lots of that. You've also got some brilliant examples on the table for those of you watching on YouTube. But Sadia, maybe just to turn to you as well for a second. You've got some really cool job titles. When I was doing a bit of research on your background as a Chief Innovation Officer, Solutions Architect, Head of Innovation. It'd be great to see how you got to kind of dedicate your career, I guess, to the art of innovation.
I think for me, funnily enough, I was Imperial as well, so a nice little connection there. For me, innovation wasn't something that I thought I would necessarily go into. I always was more interested in problem solving, and that's where my passion for innovation comes from. It really does come from, if there's a problem, I want to solve it. And I initially thought I'd do that through an academic route. So studied, did my PhD, absolutely loved working in academia, but also wanted to have a much bigger impact in the world. And I thought working with businesses and in the corporate world, I'd have the opportunity to do that. And what I found I had a skill set for was really that problem solving piece and looking at what comes next for the business. And that's really what I've just focused on for pretty much the rest of my career. And I hope that I continue doing it for the rest of my career.
Amazing. And as you said as well, it's all about the problem and finding creative solutions to that. Do you find it's the same in your line of work, Rodrigo, or do you start with a solution, like an innovative idea that you have, and do you then apply it to a real world problem like water shortage or...
Well, I suppose you could generate ideas from both ways. You either start with a problem or you start with an opportunity. So I think both directions are valid. At the end of the day, you need to solve a problem.
Exactly.
But either you start with the opportunity or with the problem itself. It's completely up to you.
And how do you know when I mean, so many ideas must come from your line of work, but how do you know when one might stick and might actually has the legs to go a bit further than just a thought in the head?
I suppose depending what type of idea we're talking and what type of grade of maturity, I always find the similarity of ideas with people or persons, right? Like you have the same almost stages of growth. At the beginning, an idea is really fragile and only kind of like can survive with the mom and the dad, and then like close relative, and then that idea start to have a bit of legs, is able to walk and to communicate and to have some abilities, and you cannot make money yet with that idea because it's still kind of like in a quite infant stage. But after kind of like becomes a bit of a rebel idea, and then is able to progress to the different stages and build his social network and his kind of like support network around it, and at some point hopefully start to work and generate some money and sustain itself. And
be independent. Be independent.
Be independent, and hopefully just pay once you retire, pay your pension. That would be really good.
Yeah, I think for me, just adding on to that is working out which ideas have the legs. There's also working out which ones might not be ready yet. A lot of the innovation portfolios that I've seen over the years, you will explore hundreds of ideas to find a solution for a problem or to look for opportunities, but a lot of them don't have legs, either because the market's not ready for it, because that's a huge thing. It's you have to have a place for your idea to go. Or it might be a case of the tech's not there yet, or a whole host of reasons, but it's finding the ones where all of those elements come together to give you a success. And I think that's the real thing that we try and push through in innovation and in startups. It's how do we get that one idea from all of them that will be successful.
It's like the right idea, the right time, the right place.
Yeah.
It's various elements in there. I guess, what have you learned from ideas that didn't work out, like failures, perhaps? I mean, I bet there's loads of them. To have one good idea, you must have 100, in the pile on the floor and kind of papers all scrunched up. What are the lessons to learn from those moments?
Sure. For me, they're not such as mistakes. It's like, if you find this analogy of like ideas as scoring a goal, for example, in football, right? You have to first find that idea. Imagine if that's the ball. And then once you have that idea, being able to pass it around to all the players in your team is really hard if you just go with that idea yourself and to try to score. And then you need to shoot several times. So as many attempts you have in front of the net, more chances of success. So in order to score, in order to have an idea that like really has impact, you need to try several times. It's really hard to in the first occasion without trying score a goal.
That's exactly to your point, Rodrigo. You pass it to team members, you bring people along on that journey with you, and that's absolutely key. And I think some of the biggest failures have been where people haven't shared enough or gotten the right team with them and behind them.
For me as well, there is, to your earlier question, where you stop an idea or where you put it on the freezer, you need to know at what moment you are, what opportunities come to you, and what is the right idea to jump into.
Is it often at that proof of concept stage, or is it earlier or later? I suppose making that judgment as to when an idea is not going to carry forward is very difficult.
Yeah, I suppose you have like limits in terms of like what you can do, right? Like how many ideas you can think in your head, how many of them you can put on paper, how many of them you can put in a prototype or in a proof of principle, how many of them you can test with consumers or with people. That's the main point that validates an idea, and then there's many other stages and sub stages behind. So I suppose is the beauty of it. It's not like it's a science and an art combined. There's not a formula for it. So it's at least for me is what it excites me.
It's almost placing your bets, isn't it? It's saying, I've got these ideas, I think these ones have legs, but which one are you actually going to pursue? Because you're right, you can't pursue them all. As much as we would love to, we have to make choices. And I think that's one of the things that really also determines success. What are you choosing to back? And what are you choosing to leave behind, and making those active choices of, I'm going for this versus this.
You mentioned as well, Sadia, about the importance of bringing people with you and just backing yourself, believing in your idea is kind of key before, it goes out into the world and really gains momentum. And when you're kind of, starting to gain traction, how important is kind of your personal story and motivation behind your idea? And how do you balance that with then kind of slowly handing it over to a bigger team or a network of support?
I think that your personal conviction is hugely important, because if you don't believe in it, nobody else is going to believe in it. You can't push something that you don't have faith in. So your personal passion and conviction is absolutely key. There's a really interesting book. The book's called Grit, and it's all about passion and perseverance, and how that's one of the best indicators for project success or for any kind of success. Because if you believe in something, you will keep pushing for it because you believe in it. And if you've got perseverance, you can deal with those setbacks. And ultimately, if you've got the passion, the perseverance, whatever else you don't have, you will find a way to get it because you care and because you have perseverance. You don't have the right scientist, you don't have the right technical knowledge, you'll go find them. You don't have the right amount of money, you'll go get backing, and you will keep pushing. And I think that's really, really important. And I personally love that book because it outlines it so neatly in distilling it to passion and then perseverance.
We sort of tackled failure. We can put that to one side. We've got a brilliant idea. Now we need to make it into a game changer. So, Rodrigo, perhaps could you talk us through how, when you've sort of got an idea which is starting to build momentum and gain momentum, and people are getting excited by it, how do you sort of scale it up and make it even bigger?
Sure. So building a bit as well on the grid and on the passion. I remember when we had this idea, we came to the professors of chemistry in Imperial, and we explained what we wanted to do, and they said, it's impossible, you cannot do it. And we came like 1 week later and like showing the prototype, and even if they saw it like a water, hold it in seaweed, they still, no, it's not possible. But like, so you can see it, it's here. So it's about kind of like, sometimes from the naive place of like, you understand later on that like theoretically there is some challenges there, but like in the world of, for example, packaging water, there is not black and white. We can package water for a certain period of time. So it's not like we wanted to keep it forever. And it's one of our added values as well. Like the material doesn't stay there forever. But coming back to your question of how we managed to scale up. So there was a lot of these storytelling or communication or trying to bring people with us on the idea. What it was extremely lucky is that the first product that we have tells the story by itself. It's like a little bubble that you can eat. So everyone gets quite fascinated by it and understand it. It's almost the storyteller of the rest of the products. And we were able to basically do a crowdfunding campaign to raise some money to be able to industrialize the process. So that was back in 2017. We did a video where we explained a bit our intentions, and we were able to raise from 100 people, from £10 to a few thousands. We were able to raise a bit less than £1 million to be able to start to make machinery. And with that machinery, we were able to keep validating the idea, to keep changing the idea. At the beginning, the idea of these machines that we were not going to operate those machines, we were going to give to different business so they can make their own packaging. Later on, we discovered that business, they don't want to take that type of machinery or extra effort to make their own packaging, so they prefer the packaging to be delivered to them. So we pivot, or we change a bit the business model around it, and as well to be able to have brothers or sisters in terms of ideas, coming back to the analogy, and not put all the bets on this idea of the edible packaging. It paid off because, for example, during COVID times, all the bets that we had on sport events at that point, we were going to do the New York Marathon. We had a really big contract with an alcohol brand, and everything went into the freezer for a couple of years. And lucky enough that we started to work on parallel with another idea, in that case, the takeaway boxes. That was a market that at that point it was not suffering as much as the other sport events. We were able to keep growing the business and to generate some revenue on that front.
That's really interesting. So it's sort of the momentum built by one good idea, has sort of generated other ideas, solving similar problems, I suppose. So,
You also mentioned there was one video that you created that just really blew up and helped, I guess, in gaining traction and visibility.
Correct. So the first video we licensed under Creative Commons, so that means that everyone could do it. And that was really good. I think it got like around 8 million views overnight on Facebook at that time. And then a lot of people started to replicate this recipe and put it on YouTube. And that was kind of like, that gave us a lot of visibility and a lot of momentum. And at that point, we were not thinking to create a startup or a venture. We were just like passionate about the idea, but that gave us a bit the push of saying, oh, there might be something here. Coming back to the point of like, when you give legs to an idea, and like there is some validation, there's a lot of people who really want this idea to happen. Let's keep working on it. And we are still working on it. So we have not still kind of like solved the full problem, which is a huge problem in terms of like single-use plastic. This is still a big journey for us and for all the people that are in the same path than us to go, but it's what is exciting as well.
Nice. And Sadia, earlier you mentioned as well about the market being right for a certain idea, and that reminds me a lot of what Rodrigo was just sharing about. If there is demand, or you're generating demand for something, you're going to have much more of a chance to actually be successful in whatever you're trying to sell, whether it's a product or a service. How do you get that interest and support and buy-in from consumers when it comes to an idea?
I think one of the ways that I like to think about that is so picking up what you said earlier, Rodriguez, about having these formal processes around the innovation cycle. One of the things that I like to look at as part of a formal process is the concept of jobs to be done. and it's looking at what does my end consumer need to do with their day, or where does my product fit, or where does my service fit with my end user. And then what you do with that is you then look at your product and you say, okay, how does this help them do that? What are the pains and what are the gains?
Mm-hmm.
And then you use that to craft your story of how do I help you? Because that's a much more powerful story than saying, this is really cool and exciting, because that will buy in to some extent, because there are lots of people who like cool and exciting new things. But how are you solving the problem for them? And communicating that is, I think, the route to getting the consumer buy-in and showing that the market is there, because sometimes you don't know that the market's there because it doesn't exist sometimes, and you've actually got to make that market. And a good example of that is where you were talking about, going to the scientists around, here's a packaging that can hold water, and them saying, no, it can't be done. And you're like, well, we've now done it. And I think that's another factor that we often get wrapped up in, which is, particularly when you're quite technical, I know a lot and I'm an expert in this field, and you almost start closing off yourself to new ideas and things that you haven't come across. And I think that's something that I personally try to work very hard to avoid doing, which is, okay, it sounds bizarre and out there, but let's explore and keeping that open mind. I think, yeah.
Maybe to build on that, and maybe a tip for the audience that is listening. When we do these innovation or ideation sessions, we start most of the time with the worst idea possible when you have a problem. And you try to build on it and pass it to the person that is next to you and explain what is the worst idea. That person need to make it even worse. And then even worse. And then at some point, kind of like you leave all your like assumptions behind. And most of the time, those ideas are quite unusual and things that people never thought of and become quite powerful. So it's a good tip. If you have a problem, I start with what would be the bad idea, because in that way you don't have to think too hard, because it's a bad idea anyway, and then make it even worse. And then at some point try to find what are the elements that you think you can rescue to build into them a good idea.
Did you know that at Deloitte we support social enterprises through our 5 Million Futures program? One of my favourites is Luminary Bakery in London. They use baking as a tool to take women on a journey to employability and entrepreneurship, equipping them with transferable skills for the working world. Their letterbox brownies are absolutely incredible, and they even have a cookbook. If you fancy a taste, just head to luminarybakery.com or check out the show notes. Now, back to our topic of the day.
Technology or perhaps process can be a bit of a blockage, but also a real game changer in terms of the support, the amplification. You have a background in data science, don't you,
I do.
Sadia? And so how can technology help us and kind of make these ideas into really successful ones?
I think it's a good question. Technology plays a role across everything we do. One of the things that I bring from my data science background is the importance of evidence for your ideas. It's about the evidence you can show. It's not good enough to be able to say, because some people are wonderful orators and they'll talk to you and they will convince you that the sky is pink and the grass is blue, and and that's fantastic. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, you have to have evidence. And whether that evidence is, we've done a trial and a proof of concept, and that's one of the things that we do a lot within Deloitte Ventures, is taking these wonderful ideas and then actually trialing them out to prove that they can work and they can solve a problem. So I think evidence comes into play, whether it's evidence of market research or anything else. It's how do you show something, not just talk about it.
And for us, probably as well, just to make a note that it's not only upcoming technology. Most of the technology for us had been already invented.
Yeah,
we were living in a world without plastic a few decades ago, and we had all those solutions up to hand. We were able to consume, to sell, to transport things without use of this material. So it's coming back. Just for example, the first product, we didn't invent it. It was a technology was there from 1930s to make things like fake caviar. We just changed the field. Instead of using it for food applications, to use it for packaging. And most of the times that's the case. It's not reinventing the wheel, let's put it that way. It's just taking a wheel that is used in another field and adapt it to our own mission. That is, in our case, is to make plastic packaging disappear.
And Rodrigo, perhaps you could talk to us about NotPla's entry into the Earthshot Prize, and I think it was an award winner this year. And actually, in a previous episode, we've had Hannah Jones on the podcast discussing the awards, and Deloitte is an implementation partner for the awards. But how has that sort of changed the game for NotPla?
Absolutely. So we are the current winners of the category Build a Waste-Free World. Really big honor. I think we are the only UK winner so far. Last year, the winner of our category was Costa Rica, like the full country. So it's like such a big kind of like a spotlight to have. A lot of responsibility as well. The prize comes with money, which is really good for us being a startup, because it's £1 million. So it's really helped us to put some bets, coming back to the ideas, and to give legs to some ideas that otherwise we won't have the resources to put legs. It helped us quite a lot with networks and to be able to access certain support from different partners and different connections that otherwise we won't be able to do. And it had been really key different things from the we had an accelerator in Windsor Castle with all the finalists, and it was really insightful to connect with other people doing similar things for similar missions, but from different places, from NGOs to institutions to governments. So it had been really insightful, and as well to have like the figure of Prince William as supporter of the prize, and now of NotPla behind us. He spent a full morning a couple of weeks ago in our office. He's preaching for our products and our boxes. I think he made a really nice introduction with Aston Villa, his team, to have our boxes in the stadium. So he's really committed as well to see this idea succeed.
And just moving on a little bit, Sadia, obviously, we're really interested in the role that big business can play in ideas and building that momentum. Great to get your thoughts on the role of business and how can businesses really help some of these startup organizations.
I think for me it's actually a two-way street. It's not just a case of how can big business help startups and smaller organizations. There's a big piece that says how can these smaller organizations, which have often very innovative, unusual ideas, help big business. Ultimately, big businesses are successful because they do something, they do it well, and they keep doing it. That's how you grow success. You have to innovate because times change. Sometimes it can be hard to innovate, and when that's the case, you can get inspiration from lots of different places. And a big place where throughout my career in big businesses I've looked is towards startups, because we tend to go through a process of we have a problem that needs to solve, or we need to change the way we're doing something, and you tend to have a few limited options. One is we can build something, we can buy something, we can partner with somebody. And those are the three main ways that you would approach something. And working with a startup, for example, where they have a solution, it's almost like a shortcut to your innovation process. And then the flip side, which you were talking about, which is how can big businesses help smaller organizations, is it's an amazing platform. Big businesses have a market. They already have customers. They have, PR campaigns. They have access to vast amounts of resources, which small organizations don't. So it can be a really nice two-way win-win situation. And when you do get a win-win situation, you get some really great innovation in the market.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because I often think when there's a disruptive service or product or company that comes to the market, often I think the established organizations who've been doing whatever they're doing for decades, they're the ones who probably should have come up with this clever idea. So I think it's really interesting what you're saying there, Sadia. But Rodrigo, what's your experience of working with larger organizations?
Sure, a bit working on the point before. I think organizations are like boats, right? If you have a small boat, a single-handed boat, and the wind change, you are really agile. You just need to think and just steer, and your boat goes in different direction. When you have a slightly bigger boat, and we experience this now, we are 74 people. Even to change the route of the boat, you need to communicate, you need to plan in advance, and it's not as agile as when we were a couple of people. And I suppose for big organizations, the challenge of changing direction, for example, it's really big, right? And you are not built for that, right? Like if you have a big transatlantic and you need to change or stop or accelerate, it's really hard, and a lot of planning and resources they need to collide in order to be able to do that maneuver. So I understand that different organizations have different challenges. For us, had been really helpful to communicate to partner up with organizations that they are much bigger than us. For example, Just Eat, because we were able to place one of our solutions into a much bigger platform in this case to achieve big impact. That is a bit what we are here about. So Just Eat provide us the platform and provide us the support to start to implement the solution, and we provide the solution. So it's about finding these kind of like collaborations where people have problems in bigger scale, and we as a smaller player can start to implement that solution that will need a bit more resources to be able to satisfy that demand and that kind of like big scale in terms of production capacity and challenges and communication. But I think we are getting there, and the proof, for example, that Just Eat, a huge takeaway delivery partner, is implementing this in the millions now. We are in 8 countries and it's working out. It makes the point that like it's possible to be able to do that, at least for us.
I think we could talk for hours about this topic. It's so interesting. And maybe before we let you go, a couple of last questions, maybe for you first, Rodrigo. What would your advice be to people who think they've got this game-changing, planet-saving idea? What would you say to them?
Try it. Like, let's give it a go. Invest a bit in your idea. Even if it's time, or even if it's money. I work quite a lot with students. I'm a lecturer in different universities, and it's incredible how much money and resources people put in their formal education. But after they graduate, it's like, oh, I need to find a job. And it's like most of the times they, at that point in their career, they are really, they have a lot of boiling ideas in their hands, and it's a matter of like putting a bit of extra resources, time, money into build them, and hopefully from there, it can generate something. And the same thing for everyone. If you can save some money instead of anything that you have saved, but like to build your idea and to make it work at least, and as well, the other advice is try to share it. Basically, again, coming back to the analogy of football, it's really hard to score yourself. You need to find who is in your team, and every time you pass an idea, it's amazing. Ideas have this ability that they multiply, right? Like if you have an idea and I have an idea, and you share my idea, we share ideas, every one of us goes home with 2 ideas, right? So it's not like they multiply. So it's amazing, and normally they come richer. So sometimes in society there's this sometimes misconception that someone is going to copy my idea, I'm not going to share it. For my experience, it's the opposite. Every time that you are able to share an idea, it comes back bigger and with more allies. So it's good to share it.
Get better and richer. What about you, Sadia? Your advice to kind of businesses looking to be more innovative, or teams within businesses?
I think being open-minded. I think that's hugely important. Being genuinely open-minded to new possibilities, to different ways of thinking, to different ways of working. But for me, that is key to innovation. Being open-minded, but also looking at how you drive it through from the idea to value. Because it's great to have lots of ideas, but you have to push it through to the value stage.
Thanks, Sadia. I mean, I think you both summed it up really well there. And actually, Rodrigo, your point made me think of a John Steinbeck quote, which is, ideas are like rabbits. You get a couple and learn how to handle them, and then pretty soon you end up with a dozen. So I think, but I think you touched on really well. But Sadia and Rodrigo, thank you so much for coming into the green room today to chat to us about this. I think, Tiffany and I have learned an awful lot about how to make an idea into a success. But perhaps in a nutshell, you could tell our listeners, tell our audience a quick response to this week's big question, which is, what does it take to make an idea a success?
Making an idea into a success, for me, the first piece is do what you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about it, it's not going to work, and persevere. There will be setbacks over and over and over again, but you've got to keep trying and keep going.
Similar to that, coming back to the analogy of football, first observing where the idea is, or listening, catching that ball, then being able to pass it, pass. And then once you are close, shoot. There's never going to be like the net without a goalie. There's always going to be some challenges. That's why it's exciting to play this game. And then, try to score as many times as you can. So, and in order to do that, as we were saying before, you need to have some grit. You need to put a bit of time and focus and energy in to make this or to play this game with your own idea.
Rodrigo, Sadia, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We'll be back next time with another big question. This podcast is produced by our very own Pod Squad and is hosted by George Parrott, Lizzie Elston, Ethan Worth, and Tiffany DeConnick. Thanks to our creative studio for their technical support. Original music by Ali Barrett from our consulting team.